up this old desk for free off the streets of Madison in April 2016. This was actually a gateway Craigslist score. It made me realize abandoned solid wood furniture could be repurposed in the workshop. Starting with something like this saves a ton of time and lumber like we saw in the old desk miter saw station. I'm doing 3 layers of wood for this top, a nice piece of plywood for the foundation, a middle rougher piece that can be replaced if it gets damaged, and a hardboard top that looks nice and is very easy to replace if it's looking too scruffy. So why the long break here? Primarily I hit a gumption trap. I needed to lift that heavy desk up precisely to the height of the table saw, and I wanted to make the outfeed table roll, but I wasn't sure how to do all that. Then in January 2018, Make Something's David Picciuto tweeted about how artist woodworker Wendell Castle had died. Clearly he was incredibly talented, but I was really impressed by his clamp racks. These just have some artistry to them that I hadn't seen in shop furniture before, and it inspired me to think, is there a way I could have that kind of an inspiration in the workshop with this outfeed table? So I came up with a plan to add some shape to the 2x10s I was using. So I see now that my math doesn't really add up here. It's too tall with the wheel on. But this has kind of given me a do-over because now I can try using a drill to give a more rounded transition between the two angles. I've never done dowel joints before, so I'm going to try them for the first time with this frame. My hammering drove the joint apart, so I'll try to squeeze it back together. This is ridiculous. Okay, so maybe that was the problem. I can't do this sideways, you gotta do it like this. I'm having trouble getting my boards to line up and stay balanced for this second joint. That's pretty strong stuff. Already busted. So what went wrong here? I shouldn't have tried pounding that dowel flush. My angle clamp wasn't strong enough. This thing wasn't designed to be used with 2x4s. And I also should have just chilled out. But this actually was good practice anyway. This experience came in handy later when I was trying to use DIY dominoes to glue together boards for that fancy curved step. And bottom line, I think this is a good reminder that screws exist for a reason. So that's what I did here. I switched to tried and true pocket hole screws. Lucky for me, I only had to replace the cross piece. The dowels were still glued in the long board, so all I had to do was make sure the screws missed those dowels. Dang. Since this is a contractor saw, the motor hangs off the back, it tilts with the blade, and it raises and lowers with the blade. There's just barely enough room to have some plywood between the top of that start capacitor on the top of the motor here and the bottom of the plywood. I'm gonna use the top of my table saw as my reference surface, but just to make it easier to transfer that, I'm gonna measure from the top of the level here. So this is the highest point, and when we lower the blade, we'll see the farthest point, which ends up being about 10 inches here. So we'll just round it up to 11. So we know that this edge over here needs to be 11 inches away from this. No way. These are all the same size, but this last one I didn't measure. That was the offcut. It was the same size as the rest of them. Oh well. The top of the motor is still sticking out above the bottom piece of that plywood. I can spin the motor a little to reduce that, but it's not enough. So I'll have to groove out that top piece of plywood a bit. So before I moved on to the next step, I thought, I'm gonna try to sit on the edge of this plywood just to make sure that the edge of the desk wouldn't tip up or the plywood wouldn't break up here. And so I started to put my weight on it, and all of a sudden I heard this loud noise. And I had my headphones on at the time, so I wasn't 100% sure what it was. I started looking around. This looked fine up here. I looked at the plywood down at the bottom, and that was intact. And then I looked down near the wheel, and suddenly the problem is revealed. Big crack here. So this board split along the grain. I thought it'd be fine, but I was wrong. At least I discovered it now before something really bad happened. So I'm gonna glue and screw the crack to fix it. And then I'll add some plywood braces on all these curves to prevent this from happening again. Landed glue side up. I've been sitting here thinking for a couple of days, how do I fix this problem without taking the desk back off the platform? And I've come to the conclusion that I just have to take the desk back off the platform. Wasn't as bad as I thought. Because I'm already down here, I'll also add some wheels to the middle of the platform to limit how far that span can bend. That went way too well. Now I can finally get back to grooving out the plywood above the motor. So why the gap this time? I thought I needed to install a board between the outfeed table and the table saw to fix a problem that I was running into. Then after 7-ish months of using the outfeed table as is, I figured out I didn't need that board after all. But anyway, there were still some bolt heads on the saw that were blocking the plywood from sitting flush with the saw, so I cut some reliefs in the plywood for those. I'm screwing these layers together with brass screws just in case I'm ever cutting on here and I hit a screw. Brass won't hurt a steel blade like a steel screw would. And now I'll use a flush trim router bit to cut the miter slots. why the gap this time? Because I didn't realize I had basically finished it already. I had planned to trim around the plywood edge, and I wasn't sure how to hide the clamps without blocking the drawers, but now I kind of like the raw look of this, so I ripped off the visible cardboard and I'm calling it good. In the end, I'm super happy with it, but I think back to my super simple outfeed extension. Lots of commenters on that video said it wasn't simple at all. Well, this is what I was envisioning when I called it that. That outfeed extension didn't take me 5 years to finish, I know that much. Thanks for watching.